Here is my 2012 Mazda 3 with the 2-liter SkyActiv engine. I've got some interesting noise coming out of the engine compartment. I'm suspecting it might be a tensioner, but I'm going to try to record that sound and then let you know where I ended up for a fix. So here's our engine compartment. This car has about 135,000 miles, so not too many miles, but enough. Don't mind the bungee cord over the battery cover, but I believe the noise is coming from the engine compartment over here. That's where the serpentine belt and the tensioner is. So I'll attempt to record that now, and then you can compare it to maybe what noise you might be hearing. So I'll leave the camera in this position. The car hasn't been started this morning yet, and it tends to be worse when it hasn't been driven. So what I'll do is I'll start the engine, you'll hear that noise, and then it seems to get worse when you put it into drive, or reverse for that matter. So I'll do that as well. So that actually worked out really well. So that is definitely the sound that I'm hearing, and it came through pretty clear in the video. I am hopeful that that noise is coming from the tensioner. Here is a tensioner, and again, this is a 2-liter SkyActiv Mazda 3. Tensioner sits like this. This piece is like a hydraulic spring or absorber, and that goes in the following orientation. This goes like so, and then it goes into this area here, and I'll show you in more detail. But the only bolts of interest for taking the tensioner off are here and here. You do not want to take this off or take this off. I will try to give you a better view of the tensioner while it's on the car. Again, it will be in this orientation, and the bolts that we'll be looking to remove are here and through here. This one has a nut, and this one is actually a bolt that goes through. And that is located right there. So you can see it here. And this is the hydraulic tension piece. And it looks like there's some oil on it. You can see I've rubbed my finger there to see if it's leaking, so that might be the issue. And the top bolt is right there. It is difficult to see. I'll try to get a better focus on that. And then the bottom bolt is down there. So let's see if we can get closer. Okay, so here's a view of the top nut that holds the absorber on, and you could get a better view of the fact that there's a lot of oil around mine built up, so I suspect that it's leaking potentially. And let's see if we can get lower. There's the wheel itself. The first thing you may as well do is remove three 10mm bolts from the underpan on the front of your Mazda. You can do what I did and say, I'm not gonna need to do that, I'm not gonna drop a wrench, but if you have half the luck I did, you'll still drop it 5 times. So those bolts they're recessed. They look like this, and there are 3 locations. So one up here, there's one of those in the middle, and then one more on the edge. But once you do that, you can at least pull this down a bit and get the wrenches. So the first thing we need to do is release the tension. Again, this is in this orientation. This bolt-looking thing here is for releasing the tension. So the belt goes underneath here, and by pulling this like this, so you get a wrench on here and you torque it backward, it'll compress this spring because this is fixed, and then it will release the tension on the wheel, and then you can kind of slide the serpentine belt out of the way so you can have an easier time installing this thing. All right, so I think I've learned a slight secret here. So although I went out and purchased a angled box wrench, so to speak, it looks like you can get to it with a regular wrench from the other side. So rather than coming in from here, coming in from the back. It's not easy, but you can kind of get in there. So I've got the wrench sitting on the tensioner right now. See if we can see that. Okay, so it's focusing a bit, so you can see the wrench that's sitting along here, and right there is where it's attached to that piece of metal on the tensioner to reduce the tension. So I'm gonna try to do it from that angle, and that might also make it easier to get the belt on. So I've got that wrench on. I'm able to push it or release the tension quite a bit, but not quite enough. So I'm using the rubber end of this hammer simply so I can push down on the wrench. Chance of this going well is low, but we'll give it a shot.
Okay, so here is a pictorial representation of what I was trying to explain when I was working on the car. So I'm looking from the side of the car, so this is the orientation, so we're looking at the engine bay. So here we are, and I had put this wrench here, and that wrench is attached to that apparatus that's on the tensioner, and you basically try to loosen that in the loosened direction, and it will release the tension on the tensioner. The problem was I could get the wrench on, I could push it down a little bit, but I couldn't push it down that far. So then what I did is I used the butt of the hammer to push this wrench down a lot further, and then I was able to fully release the tensioner. So that's what I was trying to explain. Hopefully this pictorial helps, and good luck.
Okay, that worked, and I'm actually able to fully compress the tensioner, so I feel pretty good about that. Now I'm going to release it. So bolt-wise, this is what I was talking about. So this bolt here goes through here. That's the bottom mounting point. Do not remove this bolt, or in this case, this bolt or this bolt. And this nut goes on the top of the tensioner. And this one's pretty easy. You just got to break it. This one, you can't really get it out until you're taking the whole assembly out because there's just not enough room between the engine case and the side of the car. I can only express in words how many wrenches I've dropped onto the underpan of the Mazda. In any case, that lower bolt, again, the one that goes here, will not come out because it's a long bolt, so just keep loosening that. It really helps to have one of those ratcheting box wrenches. Once we have this lower bolt out, then we're going to be pulling this upper, it's actually a nut that's up there, and that'll be the next piece we take off. Again, that's 12 millimeters as well. Note that this lower bolt here, this will not come out entirely, so it's going to come out only so far, and the only way you're going to be able to get it out is when you take everything out at once. It took a little bit of work to break it, but once you broke it, it's actually quite easy. I've noticed while trying to remove this tensioner that there is a pretty good visibility point. So your arms are coming in this way to get to that tensioner, but you can see the bolts in between here and here. It's not going to come through on camera very well, but that bright spot there, if it would ever focus with the camera, which I don't think it will, that is actually the bolt that we're trying to get a hold of. But you know, when you're standing here over it personally, you can see that pretty well, so it gives you a place to look when you're wrenching from over here. Okay, so we got the bolt loosened as far as it can go on the bottom, and we got the nut on the top taken off. So now we just need to pull it off of there, and we'll probably also need our 17 millimeter detensioner wrench, if you want to call it that, to reduce the or release the pressure on the spring. All right, so I was able to get it off. You can see it dangling there. What I ended up doing is getting kind of a long screwdriver and putting it in between the engine case and the upper bolt, and then I was able to kind of pry it off. And now it's loose, so I'll get that out of here and we'll inspect it. All right, so we've got our old tensioner out, which is here, obviously. The part I ordered from Rock Auto appears to be the same, and I think I only paid, I think shipped it was 85 bucks, so not too bad. I don't have super high hopes that this is the problem for this noise, however, because I got a little bit of play in the wheel, but really not that much, unless this is really beat up and I can't really tell. There was a lot of oil residue around it, but it was dried up, you know, you can see it on the wheel and such, so maybe the oil inside this quote-unquote hydraulic dampener was the problem, but right now I'm not really feeling like I have high hopes, but we'll think positive and we'll put it in and see what happens. Before putting the tensioner on, we should really check the belt. So I kind of popped it off. It's a relatively easy routing. It's not a very long belt. This belt doesn't look bad. I don't see any rips, tears, or anything. It's very malleable or what have you, so it's not stiff. So I'm gonna reinstall it. You know, a pro would probably replace this while they were here, but I'm not gonna do that. Okay, reassembly. The instructions say that we're supposed to, once it's installed, use the tension release, unit here for the wrench, and we're supposed to compress this slowly all the way and then let it recover all the way 3 times, and that's with the intent of bleeding this hydraulic damper, I guess. So we'll see what that takes to do, but that's the plan. All right, here we go. Let the fun begin. We're gonna start with this lower bolted portion because there's no way you could get this bolt on if you had the top one on. So this has got to go in first. Might not need to be tightened down first, but it's definitely gonna get on there first. So see what we can do here. So getting it roughly in place actually wasn't that bad. So the lower bolt, we had to locate where that went into the engine case, and I kind of got that in place, but I haven't got any threads on it. And then on the upper bolt that comes out of the engine case, where we have to put the damper over the bolt, I just kind of put that over the top of it. So I'm gonna loosely get the nut on there so at least it doesn't pop off. And again, the real challenge is gonna be getting this belt in place, I believe, based on the way this tensioner works and how hard it is to get a wrench on that tensioning apparatus on the tensioner. I don't know what the torque specifications are, but I'm just gonna tighten it pretty snug. I cannot get this 12mm socket on the lower bolt, so gonna have to go with a box wrench. The gear wrench is just not quite working out. Really having a tough time getting a wrench to really get some leverage on that lower bolt or a ratchet, so I just went to a 1/4 inch drive. I think it's the thinnest thing I have this wise to fit in between the tensioner and the side of the car, so we'll give that a shot. All right, so that was a real pain in the neck, but I do believe everything is on there now. So the next step, prior to trying to get that belt on, is to bleed the hydraulic tensioner spring, whatever that thing's called. So it basically says in the instructions that I have to get a socket around that tensioner bolt apparatus and slowly compress it all the way. It might take about 60 seconds to do that. You're not supposed to force it. And then let it slowly recover, and that'll take another 60 seconds. So you need to do that 3 times to apparently bleed the tensioner. All right, so we're gonna consider that bled, and now it's time to get this belt back on. As expected, it's kind of tough to get that belt on, so this is my new strategy. I'm gonna try to get the belt in place as best as possible prior to compressing the tensioner, and just to kind of get the belt where it needs to be, because it keeps falling off the furthest pulley that way, which is a, I don't know what pulley that is, it comes off the engines. All right, so the tensioner actually compressed a little bit more than I had anticipated, so it's hard to press that back, but my strategy of doing it from the back side back here with the wrench pointing that way, so basically I come in from the back side, get the wrench on there, and then of all things I was using this hammer to push down and completely compress the tensioner. But I do believe I got it now, and we're gonna give this a shot and see if it fixed our problem. Note to self, make sure to take that wrench you had sitting on the tensioner to release its tension off before starting the car. Okay, so it turned out that that sound was indeed the tensioner. I'm a little bit surprised, but I'm happy to see that because now the car is super quiet and all is back to normal. So hope that was helpful for those of you that run into the same situation, and good luck.